world over, in different time zones, in different continents, in different countries.
Yes,
Green
it's almost
morning,
a
green afternoon, green evening to everybody. We extend a very hearty welcome to all of you for having joined us from world over for this particular program live on the YouTube. We extend a very hearty welcome to all our brothers and sisters from world over. So it's a green morning, it's a green afternoon, it's a green evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very privileged afternoon as far as India is concerned. We have got Professor Tanshri Zulkifli Abdul Razak Sahab, the Honorable Rector, International Islamic University, Malaysia. Now, our focus is today is 444. That means 444th webinar, and that is making education relevant. Global confluence of intellectuals. And ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to talk and share a lot of vision with him. What are the challenging times? What is the roadmap ahead? How the future scenario would be? How the higher education would be? What exactly do we have to do? Anything, whatsoever we can think for future, we'll be talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of International Chamber for Service Industry, ICSI, we extend a very hearty welcome to our distinguished guest this afternoon and making education relevant. Now, India with the new education policy is now focusing on education, skills, technology, and creativity. Now, there are 37 sector skill councils in India taking all the canvas, the themes, whatever is to be done with education, how the skill has to be blended, and what exactly is the scenario. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 days, we talk about youth and teacher empowerment directly, and we talk about skills. Friday from Singapore, we talk about water saving, water management, water conservation. That comes from Singapore. And that on Friday, once we finish with the water management, Saturday, we take you all the way to Chicago, where from we talk about Swami Vivekanand. What did he convey about making education relevant for teachers and our youth? Your health is also very important to us. So we talk about every Saturday at 6:30 p.m. yoga, meditation, naturopathy, nutrition, organic, positive thinking, all the time global family, all of us brothers and sisters world over. Then Sunday morning from United States, Professor Satinder Dhiman from the Woodbury University, every Sunday from the Burbank we talk about. Every Sunday at 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time, you have got a live program from ASEAN every Sunday 3 p.m. And ladies and gentlemen, we get Dato Ramesh Kodamalji, the co-chairman, ASEAN India Business Council. We get Sandeep Majumdar, the president of Indian Chamber of Commerce, Cambodia. And we keep getting, different dignitaries from different countries from the ASEAN. And the last Sunday, we had Clarence Cheong from Singapore, and we had Soma Sundram from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And our complete focus is once again, what can we do together as a partners? Then finally, education has got a purpose, micro, small, and the medium enterprise. After your education, should you wish to take any kind of a startup, stand-up, entrepreneurship, you want to be self-employed, then we talk at 5 p.m. IST Indian Standard Time every Sunday with the CMD, Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise. Our chamber being an international chamber for service industry and education being a part of services sector, we are organizing 26 webinars per week, and all are dedicated globally, where the people from different countries, different continents, they are a part of over here. And our total focus is how to make education relevant. We start in the morning at 9 o'clock, we finish at 9 p.m., 12-hour seamless connectivity world over. We go early in the morning to Australia, Fiji, New Zealand. Then we come to South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and then we go to Mongolia. Then we go to Middle East, right? Starting from Saudi Arabia. Then we go to Doha, Qatar, Oman, then Kuwait, then Abu Dhabi, then Sharjah, then Dubai. Then we go to Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan. Then we come to South Asia. Then we come to Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Nepal. And then we go to Canada, United States, and European Union. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, we also have a special program between India and ASEAN, all complementary services. This is our chamber has set up for the soft skill and life skills. Complementary 36,000 youth have gone from here. Etiquettes, manners, gesture, body language, your personality, your communication, your interpersonal skill, your critical thinking, your analytical thinking, your logical thinking, and your creative thinking, your values and decision making, all that is a part. Our focus is youth empowerment, and with that is teachers empowerment. And education got to be relevant to my day-to-day life, whatever I'm doing. And that's why startups, entrepreneurships, and micro, small, and medium enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, water conservation is very important. We all got to understand world over. It is so important because during this pandemic, when we have gathered the data from world over, next misunderstanding world over is going to be on water sharing. Kindly start saving every drop of water. And you really want to pick up that, then you got to understand from our ladies, our women, and that is from your home. Women empowerment is very, very important next to our heart. And then your organic farming. Can you believe it? During this pandemic, I'm growing my own vegetables, nutrition food, my organic food, no pesticides, no urea, nothing, all organic. And my age is now 72. But I carry the energy of that 20-year-old boy. It's all what I put inside my body. That is something very important. You got to save environment and you got to have your organic. Health and wellness is very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. Take care of your health the best possible way. Music, yes, our chamber is collecting a lot of information from world over. The other day we had people from Austria, we had people from Germany, we had people from South Korea, we had people from United States, and everybody is working on how education can be empowered by the means of music, whether instrumental or vocal or whatever you talk about classical. It's a stress buster. During pandemic, no anxiety, no stress. Every evening, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, media, entertainment industry, Bollywood with us, education, being a part of it, media, entertainment, sector skill council. This evening also, we are having at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time, a very special program, educating musicians as entrepreneurs. The new approach is for all our youngsters. Do join us this evening at 5 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the research from our chamber, what we have gathered from March till 10th of December. Your basic food, your basic health, your basic education, and the world is no more B2B, business to business. It is back to basics. That is sustainable development of the world. And we very strongly believe whatever human mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. Let's come together making education relevant. It's a global confluence of educators, motivators, technocrats, counselors, wellness experts, corporate, government administrators, and decision makers together. International Chamber for Service Industry extends you a very, very warm welcome on behalf of 31 million people associated with the Chamber directly world over in 155 countries. Should you wish to send any email or you want to get it on the WhatsApp, you're more than welcome. Let's get together. And this afternoon, what a privilege, what a privilege. We have got the Honorable Professor Saab from Malaysia, who is currently a rector of the International Islamic University. He is the immediate past president of the International Association of Universities, a UNESCO-affiliated organization based in Paris. He was the convener of the Regional Center of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development based in USM beginning 2005. Professor Zuel Saha was the first Asian recipient of the prestigious 2017 Gilbert Medal. He is a fellow of the Academy of the Sciences, Malaysia, the World Academy of Art and Sciences, and the World Academy of Islamic Management. He has been appointed Senior Advisor at Asia Europe Institute. He is also the co-chair of the Right Livelihood College Steering Committee based at the University of Bonn. He is an advisory board member, Institute of Sustainable Development and Learning, Leuphana University, Germany. In October 2020, he was appointed as a member of the Qatar Foundation Higher Education Strategy Advisory Panel. The government of Japan, in recognition of his contribution to the academic collaboration and exchanges between the two nations, has conferred him the Order of the Rising Sun, gold rays with neck ribbon in September 2019. He was conferred Professor Emeritus by the USM in October 2018, in addition to several honorary doctorates that he has received from various international universities. Since 1995, Professor Saab writes weekly op education column for Malaysian dailies, especially the New Straits Times. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed it was a great privilege for me. The other day I heard him on the UNESCO's platform, and it was so soothing. It was so scintillating, right getting to my soul, my spirit, and my system. When I heard him, I took a pledge. I have to get Professor Saab at the earliest on our platform. I got across to the authorities in Malaysia, and finally we tracked him and we requested him. And ladies and gentlemen, today he had been kind to give a time to be with us. Join me in extending a very, very hearty welcome, warm welcome, right from the soul, to Professor Tan Sri Zulkifli Abdul Razakji, who is joining us from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. A pleasure to have him. What indeed a great soothing for me, because when I heard you the other day on the UNESCO's platform, every word, every sentence of yours got into my soul and my system. And I made a commitment to myself that as a Director General, International Chamber for Service Industry, I will get you on the global fraternity at the earliest. And with these words, ladies and gentlemen, hearty welcome. Pleasure to have Professor Saab this afternoon. This pandemic, by and large, we pray to Almighty, it is getting over now. Things are getting better. But how do you look at the post-pandemic scenario as far as education is concerned? Because children will be running through a lot of psychological issues. The professors would be running through various other concerns, because the children, the professor, the education system, your health, your mental health, your physical health at the same time. The new norms in education, children have started enjoying now the digital way of education. The other day when we got the stats from the world over, 71% children, those are having a correct access, seamless connectivity to the digital form of delivery mechanism. They are very happy, and they say, we need not to travel, we need not to dress up, we don't got to take, we need not to take our vehicle, we need not to go. So scenario has totally got changed. How do you look at, sir, the post-COVID scenario, and what is the roadmap which the world should take as far as education and higher education and future of education is concerned? With these words, a great and a very warm and a very hearty welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. I feel very humbled to be in your program. It looks very extensive, and I feel very small now to join your program with the 31 million people that you were talking about. If I know that number, I probably would just not join you today, but I probably halfway through and there's no way to back out. But I'm really very humbled and very honored to join you and to know your network of the service industry. Certainly, it is a issue of concern that we have been talking about, and I think there is a lot of ideas that can resonate with one another. So given the time to me, let me start by by loading up my PowerPoint. If you allow me for 45 minutes or so to go through what I thought, share it. Yeah.
We can we
What
can
I
see, sir. We can see the presentation.
okay.
Wonderful.
So given the time, let me try and share what I think. There's nothing definite about this. I think nobody knows where are we heading, but looking at what is around us and how we can make the difference is to see where are the gaps. So when you talk about the roadmaps, we have been talking about this, at least our university, for the last a year or so, in trying to adjust where education should be and how should we actually position ourselves. So let me start by thanking you once again for giving me this opportunity. Certainly, it is an honor on my part, right? Uh, this is a kind of a roadmap for me in a visual way to position ourselves where we are. For a long time, I thought education has been a kind of a factory evolving from the 300 years ago when we talk about the first industrial revolution in Europe. When they want to mass produce, they do not miss also mass producing people through what they call the education system, the school system, what have you. So in a nutshell, if you look at this system, I think the whole objective is basically to serve the market, to serve the marketplace and to earn a livelihood, as it were. It is about earning rather than learning per se. And why do I say that? Because the metaphor that we have is what I call the 3 or the 4 M's. Schools or education system is about training for manpower. And manpower is basically for the marketplace or for the industry that quote unquote promises job and promises work as such. And on that, I think the focus has always been employment, employability. These are words that have been thrown around for many times, that the university which is successful is a university that can employ people, or university can provide employment for other people, and so on and so forth. Yeah? And the focus is always on the mind. How do you increase the intellectual capacity? How do you make people more innovative, more creative, so they can be more productive and producing things that the marketplace would want, and solve some of the human problems at the same time? But that is indeed the focus. And now we are using innovation as a kind of a stepping stone to move up the ladder. People who are innovative, they can earn a lot of money, they can become entrepreneurs. All nothing wrong with that, yeah. But these are very stereotyped way of looking at what education has been molded in the industrial sort of a paradigm or framework, right? And over time, I think we are introduced to machines, and the machines over time become high technology or high tech. Now we are in that sort of mood, which is good to a certain extent. Otherwise, we will not be speaking to you today without this high tech. But with the orientation only focusing on the market or the industrial revolution, as it were, I'm not too sure in India, Sharma, whether you're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. In Malaysia, that has been the kind of a phrase that we're talking about. How do we serve the fourth industrial revolution, COVID or post-COVID? The whole paradigm or the whole idea of the fourth industrial revolution seems to dominate what education would be in the future. So in a nutshell, I will call this a kind of a factory-like, where people work almost routinely, yeah, and the school has become a factory. We respond to a bell. When the bell rings, we change classes and do things in a most mechanical way, just like the machine that we are supposed to resemble, as it were. Now, I would call it then the 4M: manpower, mind, machine, and marketplace. And the question that we ask, where is the soul of the human person? And hence, in my country, we call this education without the soul. We produce people almost robotic-like, almost machine-like, making targets of the KPI, the key performance indices, and so on and so forth. People in the industry will understand this better. And this has been the paradigm that we are focusing when we talk about the pre-COVID environment. So beyond that, I look at this as a education which is quite dehumanizing because we do not know who we are. Despite being educated, half of us are not sure where we are and who we are, and in taking the world forward. All right. So when I was asked to summarize this, I will use this acronym called WEIRD. WEIRD in the sense that it's westernized, westernized in the sense that it is a paradigm that comes from the Industrial Revolution of the West. And increasingly, it becomes a white sort of education because we begin to see now the dominance, the colonial dominance of the white becomes very, very apparent in this kind of system that we are using, whether we realize it or not. It is very economic centric. Everything else must talk about the economy. What is the economic use of this education? If there's no economic use, therefore, most people will not want to get involved with it. In our circumstances, sometimes when we want to introduce course, we are asked to do a kind of a market survey. What do the market thinks about this? If the market doesn't want it, then why introduced it? Because it is not useful in terms of employment and so on. Yeah. So it becomes industry led, industry driven, right? And it becomes also reputational obsessed. So the industry will introduce things like ranking, league tables, and we are supposed to run and make sure that we are in the top leagues at the same time. And half of the things that we do perhaps do not have a very strong sort of academic or educational basis, as it were. So at the end of the day, we end up with this dehumanizing sort of education that everybody thinks that is what education is all about, right? But fortunately, unfortunately, we are now saddled with a problem that needs us to rethink of what COVID has forced us to think. We are not able to think about the individual or the community or the country anymore. This is a problem that all humanity needs to be involved. So we need to move from individualism to collective thinking. And I talked about humanity in this particular context. Yeah. When we talk about the mind in our part of the world, ASEAN, India, and we talk about also the heart as a seat of intellect. How do you learn about the heart and how do you make the heart contribute into the purpose of education? And indeed, some people say the heart of education is education of the heart. At what point do we education the heart, just other than the mind, other than the brain, as it were, all right? And then as we move about high tech, we talk about high touch. How do you begin to humanize machines so that machines works for human being rather than the other way around? That's the way I look at it now. The youngsters particularly are very much taken into the devices that they've got. Almost as a slave to the devices rather than the other way around. And this is an issue of concern for us. So instead of talking of just livelihood, what about life itself? Is education about life or livelihood? Or is it a balance between the two? So this becomes the issue that we are talking about in my university. How do you then complement the education that was brought in through the revolution? How do you make it work in this post-COVID sort of environment? Now, in other words, we talk about the 4H rather than the 4M. And the 4M, to me, to a certain extent, is almost like a sunset sort of paradigm that needs to be modulated, that needs to be mitigated, and it needs to be complemented with other things which is beyond just the marketplace or something which is quite materialistic in that particular sense, right? So we talk about then the COVID environment. When the COVID environments come in, suddenly you find this industry just stop functioning. Most of them are closed. It is lockdown. A job is no longer available. The slogan of market and marketability somehow or rather becomes silent. Now, the university was asking, now you asked us to produce people to work in your factories. Where's the factory now? And suddenly say, no, we cannot provide jobs anymore. But they can close down. The industry can close down. The university cannot close down. The university has different commitments to make sure that education goes on, and therefore we are left in a lurch and the industry do not sort of partner with us the way it used to be pre-COVID. And what happens now? Suddenly we see other issues being brought up. Yeah. Now suddenly we know that all life matters. not just the blacks, not just human beings, animal life also matters. So in other words, we need to cast our net wider so that everything that's under the sun that lives must also be responsible in the context of education. Instead of talking just, I can't breathe, now we are talking about, I want to breathe for justice, which is indeed what, to me, education is all about. Education used to be, Sharma, a leveler of society. Is this education now a leveler of society? Does education bring justice? Or is this education now getting a lot more disparity, a lot more discrimination, and a lot more, class discrimination as such? And how about people who are not getting into education? And I mean, it is a kind of a bullying that you start to segment education for different people. And these are issues that have come out very clearly during the COVID period. We know about this, but it has not been taken up the way it is being understood today, particularly in other parts of in parts of United States and even Europe in this particular instance, where we always looked up to them where the best educations are. When we talk about world-class university, we normally talk about Europe and US, but this is where I think the bigger problem is as compared to other parts of the world. So there is something which is not right in this particular context, and therefore we need to transform. And what is it that we need to transform? From my point of view, we need to transform by adding values that you talked about in your introduction. Yeah, and one of the values that I think is very important that we need to get in touch with to transform the system is how to sympathize. In other words, if you want to talk about humanity, you must know how to sympathize. And the word sympathy becomes a key word in education, because unless and until you start to sympathize, you can't even help your neighbor, let alone working with people across the world. We do not know what sympathy is all about. You will not be able to progress beyond just your own scope and your own world. So sympathy, I think, is a value that will help us to transform the education system so that we can work across boundaries, we can work across race and religion, because we are talking about the same human being, humanity as it were, and they are the same just like us wherever they are. And I think this is a point that needs to be taught. The second part, beyond sympathy, we need to learn how to empathize. Empathy to me is basically not just to share, but also to be there when the problem occurs. We talk about poverty half of the time, but are we there when poverty occurs? Or do we understand poverty in just our air-conditioned room or in the buildings of our universities, but without witnessing or participating in where the problem is? Do we toil, do we sweat, or do we share their experience and their agony to be poor? So that we begin to understand what poverty is all about in real terms, rather than just understanding theoretically or reading some books and probably you sympathize, but empathy, I think, is a bigger thing that urge us to go and do something and learn something from the field rather than just standing where we are. And if you do this often enough, you will get into a position of compassion. In other words, you will react almost automatically to all the suffering that's around you, and to do this because it is part and parcel of our duty as a human person. And I think that's the best kind of education that we talked about, that we do not rationalize, we do not justify anymore. We know this is your role to be performed so that other people will also have the same benefit that you have got. I think these are the three elements. There are many more, but these are the three elements which I think is fundamental to transform people, and at the end of the day, to have this very important knowledge as far as education is concerned, which is humility. In our education system today, at least in Malaysia, people who educate things that they know all the solutions, and they start to prescribe solutions to others without even experiencing the problem that the other people are experiencing. We are sometimes very arrogant in telling people what to do, when we sometimes know that these people know better than we are. And how do you get into this state of humility? Because humility will allow you to learn a lot more from other people. The poorest, even the most downtrodden, we have something to learn from them, but yet this is not the circumstances we are in. We always go to other places that we think people can, can teach us more rather than our own people as such, right? So we are talking about just this, a new kind of education, what we call the whole person education. In other words, it's just not the skill, it's just not the intellect, it's just not, the marketplace. We need to go into the whole person as such, his soul, his spirit that you often talked about, yeah, which is basically the heart. And how do the heart and the mind balance together? Yeah, how do you actually work with technology without losing your soul to technology? How do you actually, if possible, humanize technology in this particular context so that there is a balance in our life? And that is what education is for me in the context of the whole person education and sharing a lot of values, working together in finding a solution which is more sustainable moving forward. All right. So what does it mean to us is basically we need to move from the wiser kind of weird kind of acronym to a wiser acronym. What does a wiser stand for me is basically wholesome. The education may not be from just one region, but we need to have a holistic, combine the East and the West and find the best of what education is all about. After all, most of the world, what do you call, pristine university, Nalanda University. I used to read about Nalanda University in the 5th century. It used to be one of the most pristine university that talks about its whole person education. Yeah, the university in Fez, Karayin University, again talk about the whole thing. And the whole idea of the person, the complete person, becomes important rather than just the human capital the way we understand it today. I means it has to be inclusive. Yeah, putting things together, understanding one another, learning from one another, and it has to be as sustainable. In other words, the solution is applicable beyond just yourself and also beyond just the human being, but talking about the creation, the whole universe as it were. You and yourself, you and your people, you and your nature, and also you and the creator for those of us who believe in God and other spiritual beings as such. E will be equitable. The final product has to be equitable, and R will be resilience. How do you become resilient in coping with the problems that we are going to face as we move forward? And indeed, the COVID environment is one of those that asks for resiliency. And from our experience in our country, most of our students are not able to cope with the lockdowns. Most of the students are not able to cope with the kind of changes, so-called the new norms that they have to do because they are not told, they are not trained to be resilient and to cope with environments that is strange to them. Yeah, the abnormal sort of environment. How do you cope and how do you make the best out of it? So we want to move into a different kind of a framework rather than the old framework of the pre-COVID into what we call the post-COVID environment. And this is what I think the discussion is all about. Yeah. So you need to now start looking at the marketplace, not as the ultimate, but marketplace eventually will teach us how to humanize life. With the livelihood that we are given, how do you make life better? How do you increase the dignity of life of yourself and other people around you? How do you make life as the central focus rather than just livelihood? For that, I think we need to go into what we call the social solidarity, which is now a key phrase in trying to tackle the pandemic, as it were. It is not social distancing. I think the word has been used all around as social distancing. Social distancing seems to give you a notion that you need to run away from what society has to offer, to isolate yourself. Yeah, the better words, of course, physical distancing. But within physical distancing, there must be social bonding or social solidarity. And this is where humanity, heart, and high touch becomes important, that we can work with one another, although we are distant. Me and you, we are now far apart, but I think there's a kind of a social solidarity that we are going to work together to solve a kind of a problem that all of us will benefit from. Doesn't matter who you are, where you are, and what you are in this particular context. Yeah. For that matter, I think we need to now look at what is it that we can do. And this is where I'll try to relate back to the service sector, or service in the sense of education, service education as it were. How do you engage yourself with the community? How do you begin to contribute to the community given the knowledge that you've got? At the same time, how do you learn from the community as a kind of a service that they will provide for you? So I think the word service, I want to take it beyond just industry. I think it's a way of life. How do you serve other people, and how do you then work together in trying to find a better way of life? Yeah. In that kind of a scenario, the marketplace needs to be modulated. In other words, you are not just serving for profit. Yeah, you are not just serving for name and fame. You are serving because it's part and parcel of the human dimension that needs to be brought forward to serve other human beings, regardless who they are. Yeah? And here is what we talk about in how do you then merge into this whole agenda of sustainable development or sustainable development goals that has been pronounced, I think, more than 30 years ago. Under the United Nations, what they call Brundtland Report in 1987, if I'm not mistaken, that's been going on now for 30 years, and we have now got 17 goals that we need to meet as inhabitants of the planet. It doesn't matter where we are. We need to work on the same goals, connect all the dots so that it can serve for the purpose of the larger majority. And this is where the issue of discrimination, the issue of divides and needs to be settled so that life can be sustainable as part of the wiser acronym that I talked to you about. And therefore, hopefully, by looking at this, we now can begin to anticipate what the post-COVID environment is all about. The post-COVID environment, to me, is to emphasize these three values of sympathy, empathy, and compassion, so that this will give us a more human sort of world, that it is serving the purpose of human being without being asked, without expecting returns, but it is part and parcel of the sacrifice that we need to do so that we can survive as a planet and as inhabitant of the planet, which is now set to go into another phase of extinction if we are not careful on how to do this. And it's not only that, I think we need to talk about achieving excellence at the end of the day. Why do we do this? Because we want to achieve excellence so that everybody can benefit from the best that there is as far as education is concerned. And we have mentioned that inclusiveness is important. So there's no more divides. At least educationally, we need to train our people. We are all the same, and we are all have the same path to move forward to make sure that we all can live with one another. And for that, I think the word resilience, boldness, and being determined, valor, as it were, becomes an important sort of value that we need to build within the education system. So if you look at this sympathy, empathy, resilient, valor, inclusive, compassion, and excellence, this is what service is all about to me, as far as that is concerned, Sharma. It's another acronym for service. So the service that we give is not just a service for money or for returns or for ROI, but a service that also to make a more human world and to have all this value embedded as we give the service. I'm not saying it's wrong to get returns for this, but within that returns, there must be this value embedded with it so that there is this what you call a human dimension when we provide services of that nature. Right? So how do you then understand this? And I think this is not something which is new. When you go back to Emile Durkheim, for example, the 19th century philosopher, I think, that talks about education. What is education? Education, he says, is about creating social solidarity. Yeah. Indeed, he said this, school indeed is a society in miniature. Is where in school that we learn the norms and the values of society. In school is where we learn how to interact, how to integrate with one another. In schools is where we learn to build understanding across cultures, across class or whatever we have, so that we can live as in that manner of solidarity. And that's what education is all about in this particular context. Meaning to say that we need to build what we call human solidarity. That human being needs to live together, and the social distancing is not the word, it's social solidarity that we want to work at. And therefore, education, to my mind, will have to build solidarity, but not in a theoretical sense, not just by reading books or not just by sitting exams, but in a practical way. And I like to tweak the word education a little bit into what I call a social edu-action. In other words, education is about acting. Education is about the behavioral change. Education is about physically impacting and contributing rather than just talking about theories and understanding or memorizing the way the moment. And I mean, the thing that we usually do in this part of the world to memorize and together with it without even understanding it, let alone translating it into something else. So it is about creating that experience, and you can only create that experience by getting yourself involved. Some people talk about learning by doing, yeah, so that the idea of community becomes internalized almost organically. It is not something that you pretend to know, but it's built in you, and therefore your neighbor becomes part of your larger family. And this is very Asian in its thinking, but even then we are losing it very, very much. Yeah. So we need to look forward the way we need to look, but the moment we turn our head around and look at solidarity as a different kind of a thing, then we begin to lose it. And I think this is a danger that we are talking today when you talk about social distancing rather than social solidarity. People are beginning to compartmentalize themselves. You just look at the vaccine now that's coming in. Yeah, we used to talk about the world needs to work together. But the moment vaccines comes in, then you find some parts of the world will get the vaccine, other parts of the world can wait. Yeah? Then other parts of the world, sometimes the worst part of the world, that do not have good healthcare services, that do not have good personnel, and they will be the last. So the whole idea of solidarity becomes almost hypocritical because we do not understand and we are not educated well enough in the understanding of what education is in the context of social solidarity. How do you make this change? Yeah. So in providing the service, therefore, I would like to venture, if you take it as an action rather than just a theoretical thing, then when we understand all these things, servicing is about creating or enhancing interdependency. Yeah, that I will provide it for you and you will provide things for me. At the end of the day, we will build a kind of a unifying environment, a society that can be independent to one another far beyond just our own borders. Yeah? There's this a bonding between human beings because of the values are the same. We value life in the same way, and therefore we understand each other and we can bond a little bit more. And finally, the solidarity will be part and parcel of the outcome. Then only I think we can talk about a one shared world. Often we talk about no one left behind, but quite clearly there are many who will be left behind because the one shared world is not properly understood. Yeah, it becomes just a cliche. It becomes a nice sort of a lip service that no one is left behind. But believe me, there'll be thousands of people left behind until we take this whole idea of solidarity, interdependency, living in a unified way and bonding with one another becomes a more real sort of outcome of what education is about in a behavioral sense of the word, right? So despite after saying that, I think education is about taking the middle path. Yeah. And I want to quote Rumi in this particular sense, because a human world is a world that actually is in a balance. Yeah. It's in a balance that understand where we are in the total picture of what humanity is all about. And I like to quote Rumi by saying the middle path is the way of wisdom. And wisdom indeed is something that is now totally lost in education today. We often talk about education in terms of knowledge. Yeah, we talk about publication, we talk about research. What we are drowned in many of this knowledge that is coming by the way. You know, you look at the internet, there's so many information and knowledge, but you can hardly find wisdom in this. And where do we find the wisdom? We need to find it in education. And where do we get this if you do not build the real person that we are, to understand who we are, the complete person that I talked to you about. Unless and until we go back and understand ourselves so that we can understand our fellow being and our environment, then I think we were lost. And when we are lost, I think this is where the COVID virus will take the best of us. And I am not too sure whether we are moving in that direction, because looking at the kind of discussion we have, people are still talking about the lockdowns and the marketplace. Sometimes lives are sacrificed because economy needs to work, it seems. Yeah. Well, economy needs to work, but it should not be at the expense of life, particularly for people who are, not given the kind of life that they are used to. So I hope I have given you a kind of a larger scenario of what education would be about. If I were to summarize it, we need to come back to education with the soul. In other words, understand the human being, and the human being is everywhere is the same. And unless and until we do that, we will not be able to work together in unison. And once you fail to do that, then I think the COVID environment will stay with us and in fact make it worse as we go along. We already see the third wave coming in my country. The third wave is also there, and this will be not the last of it until and unless we can educate ourselves in a proper way. So thank you very much, Sharma. I hope I've met your what do you call your expectation. And if there is anything that I can help you with in terms of question and answers, I'll be happy to do so. So thank you very much.
It is so very kind. It's so very kind of you to having spared your time and having come for this particular program and sparing your most valuable time to be with us over here. Indeed, it was a great soothing for all of us to see such a beautiful journey you have given us, dehumanizing education, dehumanizing education, humanity, heart, high touch, and then humanizing the life. Then you touched a very important point. Is education is for living skills or is education for life skills? Then thereafter you talked about journey from sympathy to empathy, and thereafter compassion, then the humility, then heart and mind balance, whole person education, holistic, personal education, and resilience. When you were talking about how do we cope, is it social distancing or is it social solidarity? And then you came on services. Today you have given a new dimension to services, because so far people have been talking about agriculture, manufacturing, and services, a tertiary sector. But over here you have given how do you engage with community? How do you serve others? What kind of a services are you providing? And then you also touched about the sustainable development goals, which we have got 17 of them. And goal number 4 is next to our heart, and that is the education empowerment. And then something beautiful concept you gave, the humane world. And then you told how to achieve success, what is success, and what is inclusiveness. And also the Durkheim, the education creates social solidarity and the human solidarity, what you have given. And your beautiful concept, edu action, that is unity, bonding, interdependence, solidarity, and then, of course, nothing could have been more pious and wonderful and beautiful than to quoting Rumi, because everybody world over, those enjoy poetry, those enjoy something literary. And ladies and gentlemen, I do not know, but in a very humble way, I'm a strong believer. Our chamber very strongly believes science is fine, but entire humanity is based on art and culture, art, culture, and heritage, art, culture, heritage, and humanity. When we talk about this entire ecosystem, and then something wonderfully he has given, the middle path is the way to wisdom. The middle path is the way to wisdom. Now, Professor Sir, I would request you, what would you like to tell in the post-COVID scenario to the younger generation? to youth, because let me share with you little concerns. Number one, with the artificial intelligence, augmented reality, technology seeping in, we should not keep children in illusion. Jobs are going to shrink world over. Entrepreneurship, when we talk about self-employment, when we talk about getting to the back to the basics of life, getting back to my human minimum consumption and requirement of the life, how do you look at and what message would you like to give to the younger generation?
Thank you very much. It's a very, very appropriate uh, question, but it's also difficult to answer it. We have been pondering about it. In fact, I've written a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, The Leadership Challenge. In other words, we need to tell our youngsters that education is not just about technology. My worry now, Dr. Sharma, when we come into a crunch, everybody talks about online education. You know, in Malaysia, we talk about online education as though it's a panacea for solutions moving forward. Yet we know a larger part of the population are not even privileged to have an internet. Forget about the online education per se. So these are disparity that I talked to you about, the kind of divide that I talked to you about. You know, so we need to take this in a real sense of the word. So I'm not anti-technology. I will tell you that. Otherwise, I will not be talking to you using this technology, a fine technology, as it were. But I think we need to take it in stride. In other words, it's trying to understand what technology is. Now, the technology that we are facing today is quite different from the technology that we are pursuing before. Right? In the first, second, and the third revolution, there are technology, the steam engine, electricity, the computers, these are all technology. We have been using them, they have been enhancing our life, we have benefited from them, but largely all these technology are almost outside of us. They're external to us, right? Now, the danger of this new technology is they're going to be very invasive. They are going to go into our hearts and minds, as it were, and they're going to probably dictate what we need to do until and unless we understand what being a human is all about. In other words, we need to realize that human being has got other characteristics that the technology are not able to provide for. In other words, we can be, quote unquote, for want of a better word, the master of technology rather than a technology being our master at the end of the day. Now, my worry is that when we look at how youngsters, in fact, oldsters also, the elderlies, when they use technology, they are almost using technology in the way that they are subservient to this technology. Without this technology, they are not able to live. And I think there are enough research that is alluding to this. One that I read quite recently was talking about how people who have got these devices, every morning when they woke up, the first thing that they must look at are the devices, right? Whether they like it or not. And the research said that we will look at these devices at least 200 times a day. Doesn't matter whether there's a need for it, doesn't matter there is a call or whatever. It's almost compulsively within a period of 15 minutes you must touch this, and it is almost a kind of an addiction that all of us has gone through because we do not realize it. I mean, if somebody smokes a cigarette every 15 minutes, you will call him a tobacco addict. What do you call a person who just look at the devices every 15 minutes? It must be a kind of addiction also. But because there's no smoke, there's no fume, there's no smell, we tend to ignore it. But I think it is almost an addiction. Now, once you lose yourself to a kind of an addiction, I think you will lose your humanity at the same time. That is a danger that I think that we need to see. And there's another research, if I can just quote, a very interesting research that involves India and Malaysia by chance. It's about digital lifestyle. And it's 10 country studies, and the two developing countries happened to be Malaysia and India. And the question was something like the first question was something like, how many of the respondents are not can live without looking at the device, right? Uh, in other parts of the world, in Japan, for example, the number of people who can live without the device is very high. In Germany, is the same thing, right? But in Malaysia and India, the number is extremely low. So I begin to wonder, how come developing countries like Malaysia are not able to disengage themselves from the divide? We thought people in Japan would not be able to disengage because they're all technology around them, you know? And suddenly the study says these people understand what technology is all about. And indeed, if you go to Japan, I'm sure you've been to Japan, when you go into their public transport, nobody uses the hand device. Whereas in our case, the moment you go into the public transport, everybody will take out their hand device and talk as loud as they want because, you know, they think this is their right to do so. So these are issues that I think that the younger generations are not attuned to, and we, the older generations, have not educated them enough, and then they are gone into this particular way of life that somehow or rather will make a difference if you do not educate them properly.
One more question, sir, for the global fraternity, because people are watching from world over. We have got about 152 my advisors from different countries.
Oh my
And the
God.
concern and the question is that youngsters, the children, let's see technology making optimum use, making more use, being with the social media, browsing, researching, making whatever is there. What message would you like to give to the educational, the educators, the education fraternity? Because children, before the teacher will explain, they will already be having information with them.
Yeah.
They have got time with them. Now, today, the Google is a guru. When you
Yes.
talk Indian language, Google is a guru.
Yes.
That means the Google is giving so much. You tell Alexa, I want to know what is the multiplication of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 multiplied by 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. And I get in 5 seconds,
Yes.
which if I sit and calculate is going to take more time.
Yes.
Now, memory would not be required. It
Yes.
was earlier, you were having, you remember that show, Who Will Be the Millionaire? And
Yes.
there was a show, let me give a call to my uncle and ask, Uncle, who was the president of America in 1959? And uncle is taking a telephone call and giving a 50% answer from there. Now you don't require uncle for that.
Yeah.
Because you are having information before you even expect, before you even complete your question. So, how would be the relevance of education fraternity? Where the world is going?
Yeah.
Where exactly are we moving?
Yes. Okay. So what is the purpose of education? Then it will be the question.
Yes,
Is it the purpose of education to just seek information or to know something that could be available anywhere? I mean, even before the internet, we all of us, I think, used to have Encyclopedia Britannica, and that is also a way of looking for information. I mean, it is no different, except now we can find education faster, but we have never been, human being has never been the kind of a custodian of knowledge per se or information per se. What human being is they're the custodian of wisdom. And this is why I worry that if you don't work on wisdom, you cannot find wisdom in Google. You cannot Google wisdom, you know. And that is the human dimension that we need to develop, that we are the custodian of wisdom. And these, I'm coming back to your whole idea of culture, arts, heritage. These are all where the wisdom is. But we begin to sideline this because we think technology is a solution. Sometimes it's devoid of wisdom. It doesn't really matter because it gives you an instant sort of solution. But an instant solution may not be a solution if there is no wisdom in it. How is it that our forefathers can survive a difficult kind of a life without technology, as it were, because they've got wisdom?
okay.
You know, We do not have the wisdom. And I think the post-COVID world will get destroyed because of the lack of the deficiency of wisdom that is not part of education anymore. And I am very worried about this. And when you talk about just, I'm a science student, by the way, but I feel cheated of my education because I do not have the arts. I do not understand culture. I do not understand philosophy. When I do my science, what is the philosophy of science? I don't even understand what is the philosophy of science. And therefore, my science become a utilitarian science, the marketplace. Whereas science has other dimensions, when we talk about a deeper wisdom as far as science is concerned. We lose this because technology is the one that is distracting us from what is it that we want to get. Fast, quick answers, but that is not the ultimate as far as education is concerned, if I may say so.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Professor Tan Sri Zulkifli Abdul Razak Saab from Kuala Lumpur, all the way from Malaysia. First of all, we pray to Almighty that the third wave should not come in Malaysia. Please, please, please keep it away. It should not enter. And secondly, your deep concern as a good human being that even if the vaccine comes, who is going to get the vaccine first? Who is going to be deprived of the vaccine? Where is, you are talking about digital divide? It's a world divide he's talking about. Human divide he's talking about. Human concern he's talking about. And something amazing what he mentioned. What is the purpose of education? Is it knowledge or is it wisdom? And it's going to be the lack of wisdom which basically is going to do lots of damage in future. Professor Sir, we are enriched, we are privileged, we are honored, and we are grateful, we are thankful, we become more humble with your such a wonderful kind of insight and a presence over here today. I look forward to yet another program. After 1 month with you, we will see the global little bit more in a positive way, where people should pick up that we got to become a better human being. We got to serve the humanity. We got to really be concerned about others. And we pray to Almighty that the third wave of Corona should not enter Malaysia. People should stay safe. They should stay fine. World should be a better place. We should become better human beings and we should serve the humanity in a better way. It was a treat to listen to you earlier at the UNESCO's platform, the global platform. And today we are more humble. We are privileged that you have been kind to spare your most valuable time to be with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And we look forward to yet another program with you, sir.
Thank you very much. My pleasure and my privilege. And thank you for the